Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Gods Will Have Blood, a boutique project about surviving the French Revolution from Dan Bullock. Alright, so here is a setup of The Gods Will Have Blood. This is a game where you have sympathized with the French Revolution, you are revolutionary, but now you are responsible for a bunch of show trials, and you have got to get through this by maintaining your life and your soul, while basically your entire situation conspires against you keeping both of those things. So you're going to preside over some show trials of people that you mostly don't care about, but your choices have consequences. And then there are a few people in this deck that you do care about, and you don't want to send them to the guillotine. But by the time they appear, maybe the momentum will be too great. Maybe you'll be in a position where you cannot help them. You're just going to have to see. So this is a game that you can lose in many ways, but you can only win it in one. In order to win the game, you need to do two things. One, you need your reputation to be up here at the top on this asterisk. So you've got to move your reputation up the red reputation track. And you've also got to have at least one white cube still in the bag that you use to judge people. And we're going to talk about what the trials look like. Meanwhile, if you're going to lose, there are a lot of opportunities for that. If the pawns on these trackers reach the bottom on either side, so with your reputation or with the legitimacy of the court, you will be killed and you will lose the game. If your reputation is not stellar at the end of the game, even if you're only one off on the track, well, you still lose the game. And if you have 3 white cubes here on removed white cubes, meaning that you've essentially lost your soul during this process of judgment, well, then you lose the game. And what's so fun about this one is that the way that it actually works turn to turn is extremely simple. All you're going to do is read about somebody that you're supposed to judge. You decide what you want to do with them, and then you see what the rest of the judging panel thought. So here on this card, we have a woman who does not find herself here because of her dubious politics, having made a mockery of marriage and family in her plays and pamphlets. Instead, she's in trouble because she's authored a publication encouraging the reestablishment of the monarchy. Such seditious behavior is a capital offense. So let's look at this woman and decide, you know what? This lady's guilty. We want to kill her. Goodbye. So we want to say that she's guilty. But we don't get to make that decision on our own. We have a court to contend with. So we decide our verdict, which is guilty, and then we're going to draw 2 cubes from this bag, and if at least one of them is red, then the court will agree she is guilty, and we will see what happens as a result. So let's draw 1 cube, a red, ha 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 ha. And then we'll draw 1 other cube, a white. So basically, no matter what we decided about her, we would have gotten what we wanted. Basically, red is a vote to condemn, and a white is a vote to spare, to acquit. So because we decided we wanted her to be guilty, and at least 1 cube from the bag matches our opinion on that, well, guess what? This lady is done for. Straight to the guillotine, chop chop with her. So these cubes are going to go back in the bag, and we're going to flip her card over and find out what happens. So this back of the card tells us if she is condemned, so that's the picture of the guillotine, then our reputation goes up 1. Oh, baby, so much reputation for killing this lady, this seditious woman. And we have to add to momentum. What that means is we're going to add a red cube to the bag. If we had decided to spare her, our reputation would go down, which can absolutely get you killed very quickly early in the game. And it says, or do not reset momentum. So basically we'd be faced with a decision about whether we want to reset momentum, which sometimes you really want to do, or lose face in front of the court. So resetting momentum is important because, as you might have noticed, if you need to occasionally pull an innocent verdict, well, there's only 3 white cubes in the whole game. There's a bunch of red ones that can go in the bag. If you want to pull all that momentum, all those red cubes that are going in from death after death out of the bag, then you need a way to reset your momentum and put those cubes back here. So sometimes when you manage to stop a death, to stop a killing, you get to reset momentum, and that means that you're able to kind of take a breather, put the balance of the bag back in order. There, you start with 4 red cubes and 3 white in here. But of course, things get more and more unbalanced the longer you allow the longer you allow momentum to build. You can even run out of momentum, and if you need to add momentum but cannot, the legitimacy of the court starts to go down because you become overly bloodthirsty. But in this case, we've resolved our case. This lady will be among the discarded. I prefer to put them face up so I can look at what I've done. And that's how a turn in the game works. But of course, there are a few complexities. So one we've discussed is momentum. Momentum will build the more people you kill, typically. You have to be very careful not to let things get too out of hand, or else you won't be able to stop the killing. You also need to be watching these tracks right here. One thing that makes them very interesting is that, as you'll notice, they share 3 spaces. So let's say that we're here. If my reputation was going to go up, I actually couldn't move it up because this other pawn is in the way. You can't move up into another pawn's space to share that space. However, if the court's legitimacy were to go down, it would actually skip over me and go down an additional space because you can always fall down faster, but it's harder to climb up. There's also a blue cube here that's kind of like a wild cube. So when the court is very, very legitimate, the blue cube goes in to help you sway decisions in a way of your choosing. The other thing I want to note, by the way, is that once you've run out of momentum for the first time and all the momentum cubes have gone into the bag, the game fundamentally changes. And the way that it changes is that you split the piles of the accused in 2, and you start to run 2 trials at a time. And this will persist even if you manage to reset momentum later. And that means that instead of trying each person on their own, by trying 2 people at a time, you have to make the same decision for both people, and you have to take the consequences for both cards, good or bad. And so it's a weirdly dehumanizing experience where you're no longer giving each card their individual attention. You might have someone that you want to help and then someone that you think is definitely guilty, and they're just going to be in the same trial, and you're going to have to make a decision that applies to both, which is exceptionally nasty. The other thing we'll note is that there are some blue cards in here, 3 of them, in fact, to match the 3 white cubes in the bag, and they are your friends. So one of your friends has been charged with conspiracy for associating with a prostitute, but he's still your friend. And if he dies, you have to remove a not guilty token from the judgment pool, which you really don't want to do. However, if you spare him, you lose reputation. So you need your reputation to be good enough to lose a bit in order to win the game, or maybe you're going to have to die trying to save your friends. So that is how The Gods Will Have Blood plays. So it's a relatively simple game, but it's on a deep topic. So let's have some final thoughts about that. All right, so now for some final thoughts. What did I think of The Gods Will Have Blood? Well, first things first, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned this is a boutique project, and I just want to make it really clear right now. There were only 200 copies of this game printed that were signed and numbered by Dan Bullock. I don't know about the game's future availability, and I didn't really make this review to sell the game because there isn't anything to sell. I wanted to document my experience with a very, very interesting project. So first off, this game is fascinating in the sense that it's not really a fully commercial project. The idea is not to sell more copies of the game. The idea is to kind of make a small project that's a cool game design that only a few people will buy, but it's sort of like a cottage industry thing. So I actually applaud Dan for that because he had a vision of how he wanted this game to turn out, and he went for it. And honestly, I really wanted this game, and I knew I would. So I set an alarm on my phone to go back this thing on GameFound and just like prayed that I wouldn't be the last in line. So I was very relieved to get it. I don't know what the wider availability will look like, but I'm assuming if there's demand, maybe there will be a PNP or some sort of print on demand situation. I have no idea. That will be up to Dan. That said, so what do I think of it as a game? I think this game is really impressive in ways that not many games are. So what I love about The Gods Will Have Blood is that it has an incredible simplicity to it, while also really evoking deep problems and creating a gaming experience that is surprisingly intense for how simple the game is. The game is not hard to play. You look at a card, you decide whether you think a person's innocent or guilty, you draw some cubes, and you deal with the consequences, and you move the pawns around. You know, you have a really, really, really simple gameplay setup going. However, the decisions that you make end up becoming very painful because you need to get your reputation up in order to survive. To get your reputation up, you have to kill people. However, there's people that you want to save. If you don't save them, you lose your soul. The court's legitimacy can very easily bump up or down, depending on who it is that you killed, but you can't always help that. And so basically you're just constantly in a situation where you're sort of stressed out about what's going on, both in terms of the court and your reputation, and also in terms of watching the momentum cubes go into the bag and quietly panicking about whether you're going to be able to turn the tide. Because once enough of those cubes have gone in, you start to feel really, really tense every single time about whether you're actually going to be able to save somebody when it's time to stop the bleeding. I also really loved the touch of you not really knowing if the person's innocent or guilty. You just get a little bit of information about them. And you have to read the card. You have to make a decision about them that's just a random decision. And also you'll get a little bit of card refresh because not all the same cards go into the deck every time. You leave some out of the game each time. So you'll have a different, makeup of potential condemned. But you just read a little bit of text and you have to decide if this person is guilty or not, and then you just have to deal with it. And it's really a messed up thing to do because you feel uncomfortable. Some of the descriptions of these people are sort of ambiguous. So if you're really into the game and you're kind of letting yourself mentally be in that space, it becomes really tough to make these calls because you really don't know. And in a lot of these cases, it's quite ambiguous. What's even worse is that once you accidentally let the momentum get out of control and you end up trying 2 people at a time, not only are there double the consequences, but also you are potentially hurting somebody who doesn't deserve it to get at somebody else, or you're letting somebody who seems pretty awful go free in order to try to preserve a life. And the sort of dehumanizing grossness of just trying 2 people at the same time to get it over with is so foul. And I also really love it as a game mechanism because it's so gross. You should feel kind of gross as you play it. And so the way that the different mechanisms in this game interlock is really wonderful. And I'm super impressed with what Dan has managed to do here. I think that he took some really, really limited materials and mechanisms and created something that feels a lot more expansive than what it is. The game plays really quickly. You just go through the deck. It's over in a flash. And then you feel really bad about what you did. And it's actually pretty hard to win because you don't really know what order things are going to come up in. And there's some people you just have to save. There's a whole mess involved with that as well. But I will say I particularly love the mechanism of having to build momentum by executing people and then break that momentum by sparing other people. Because you could just go racing up the reputation track with kill, 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 but then you might end up in trouble dropping the legitimacy of the court or accidentally killing somebody you didn't want to because everything got so bloodthirsty that it was like a stampede and you couldn't make it stop. This game is actually based on a novel called The Gods Will Have Blood, which I haven't read yet, but I did download it just because I was really, really curious to know more about where Dan's head was at when he made this game. I just think it's a really impressive piece of work, and I am very curious about going a little further down the rabbit hole to kind of see what he saw when he was designing this. That said, it's not a perfect game, but my little quibbles with it are not really a huge deal. So the first is that I actually had to watch his video tutorial in order to fully understand what he wanted when I was playing the game. So I more or less thought I understood the rules, but there were parts of them that I didn't think were very clear. So watching Dan's tutorial video on BGG was very helpful because I really otherwise might not have played it correctly on just a couple of counts. The other thing is that because this is just sort of a self-designed thing, there's not a graphic designer involved. I do think that some of the fonts are unreadable. So the cursive font that's used to give the names of the people who are accused and then some of the information about the consequences of their trial is like this. It's just a really spidery cursive where the lines are also too thick, and so I can't read it very easily. So there are just a couple little user experience issues that make the game less legible and therefore sometimes annoying. However, I really think that's an extremely minor quibble with something that is truly a brilliant game design. I don't know that a game like this is for everyone because I don't know that I would call it fun. It's not like you play this to have a rip-roaring good time. What this game does do for you is it offers you a really thoughtful experience about what you and your role of agency in the game are doing to people and the consequences of what your choices are. And to me, this game is important because it's pushing sort of the boundaries of what games can be about and what players can be asked to do and what they can be asked to experience within a game space, while also being a very sleek, light game. And so for me, The Gods Will Have Blood is a deeply impressive piece of work. I can't wait to see more from Dan. He's one of my favorite designers who's active right now because he's always pushing that envelope and he's always looking for something interesting, maybe upsetting, sometimes funny to do. And so this is another example of how he is willing to take risks for his art and to really put the player in a place where they're uncomfortable, but they're also really getting something out of their discomfort. So that is The Gods Will Have Blood. I honestly really love it. I absolutely am glad I spent the money on it. It was worth setting the alarm. I'll buy anything that Dan does. And, definitely be on the lookout for his next project because it will no doubt also be worthwhile. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, maybe help me out on Patreon if you're feeling generous. And most of all, happy gaming.